Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. From the Arcadian Court in downtown Toronto, welcome to the continuation of the 112th season of the Empire Club of Canada. For those of you just joining us through either our webcast, our podcast, or on Rogers Television, welcome to our meeting today. Now, before our distinguished speaker is introduced today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you all to our head table guests. And I'd ask that each guest rise for a brief moment and then be seated as your name is called, and I'd ask that the audience please refrain from applauding until all head table guests have been introduced. So, in no particular order, Mr. Andrew Bevan, the Chief of Staff and Principal Secretary at the Office of the Premier of Ontario. Mr. Bob Richardson, the Executive Vice President and National Practice Lead, Public Affairs Canada, Edelman. Ms. Barbara Jessen, President and CEO of Jessen Communications and a Director of the Empire Club of Canada. Mr. Neil Parmenter, Senior Vice President, Corporate and Public Affairs, TD Bank Group. Mr. Ali Gyasi, Chief of Staff, Minister of Finance. Mr. Noble Chamar, Partner, Castles, Brock and Blackwell, LLP, and a past President of the Empire Club of Canada. The Honourable Mitzi Hunter, Associate Minister of Finance and the MPP for Scarborough-Gilwood. Mr. Paul Foglin, Vice President, Government Relations and Communications, Ontario Retirement Communities Association, and the first Vice President of the Empire Club of Canada. Mr. Jerry Phillips, former Cabinet Minister and Member of the Provincial Legislature. Ms. Martine Erman, the Vice Chair of TD Securities. The Honourable Charles Sousa, Ontario's Minister of Finance, and I'm Gordon McIver, Executive Director of the National Executive Forum on Public Property. Ladies and gentlemen, your head table. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence in the room today of MPP Arthur Potts, who joins us. Mr. Potts, welcome to the meeting. There are thousands of incredible speeches in the archives of the Empire Club of Canada, and when one has the chance to sift through them from time to time, it becomes clear that certain thematic favorites reoccur on a regular basis. This is particularly true around anything relating to finance and job creation. Rough calculations indicate, in fact, that there are close to 850 speeches that deal with the latter theme that have been delivered at this podium since we first opened for business back in 1903. This is not, to be clear, some troubling sign of a lack of originality from the club or its thousands of guest speakers over the decades, but rather a clear indication of the importance that Canadians and our fellow Ontarians attach to personal and corporate wealth creation, most often achieved through gainful employment. The visit of our Finance Minister of Ontario this week comes at a time when Canadians are thinking a lot about their own workplace futures in the world economy that has become as volatile as it is unpredictable. For some, these are times of great opportunity. For others, stressful times of uncertainty as they face a new economy without always having the requisite skill sets to succeed. Many finance ministers have grappled with this reality in the past, including the man who sat in the federal finance minister's chair the year that Minister Charles Sousa was born. When the Honourable Donald M. Fleming addressed the Empire Club on February 13, 1958, there was a 6% premium on the Canadian dollar that was creating a very heavy handicap for exporters and the tourism industry. And while this problem was pretty much at the opposite end of the spectrum of where we find ourselves today, it was creating anxiety in many Bay Street boardrooms and led the Minister of the day to talk about the fundamental issue of job creation. Now here's a very brief extract from that speech entitled Dollars and Cents, S-E-N-S-E, delivered almost exactly 58 years ago to the day. There is much also that government can do to assist in meeting an immediate problem of unemployment, particularly if they have sufficient warning of it. There's the opportunity for direct creation of work through construction programs. This opportunity is open to all levels of government, and the municipalities are a very fertile source of employment of this kind, and the work provided at the municipal level has the advantage of providing it where it is most needed, without uprooting those for whom the work is created. The provinces, likewise, have opened to them a wide field of very useful public investment in the construction of highways, bridges, and useful public works programs, which will at the same time create a large volume of employment. The terms upon which all levels of government are able to borrow have eased greatly in the last 6 months. Money is plentiful, and interest rates on new borrowings are substantially lower. Now, finance ministers think a lot about the importance of getting Canadians to work, and Minister Sousa's speech today will be no exception. It will become, in the historical archives of the Empire Club, a snapshot in time of how we, as Canadians and as Ontarians, dealt with job creation and economic growth during a period of oil gluts, a very strong American dollar, anxiety about climate change and terrorism, and a disparity in wealth distribution, which is creating a wider gulf between the haves and the have-nots of society. Our guest speaker today certainly brings his own unique perspective to this current environment. This year, the Minister of Finance, Charles Sousa, will be presenting his 4th budget to the Ontario Legislature. Like the federal finance minister who spoke from this podium the year that the minister was born, he's spoken about the need to invest in infrastructure and public services. And he's spoken about the need to keep Ontario a low-cost place for business. So despite all the change around him, Minister Sousa has been a steady, consistent person in articulating these major themes. So, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about where Ontario's economy is heading and what the Ontario government is doing to continue to help keep our businesses strong and successful, please join me in welcoming back to the Empire Club, I think for the 3rd or 4th time, the MPP for Scarborough South and our Minister of Finance, Charles Sousa.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you for the kind introduction. Just to correct the record, that would be Mitzi Hunter, who is the MPP for Scarborough-Gilwood, and my colleague in the Ministry of Finance. You also mentioned Arthur Potts, who is my colleague, our colleague, the MPP from Beaches, East York. We also have someone else here in our audience, actually 2 other people who I would like to mention. One is Eleanor McMahon, our newest MPP from Burlington and a champion for cycling in our province. Thank you. Where is she? There she is. And I would be remiss not to mention another great MPP, a mentor to so many of us over so many years, and the retired Jerry Phillips. Is it retired after all? He's at work every day in my office as our senior intern. Jerry, thank you for being there every day. However, Gordon, I have to also introduce, and I'd like to introduce the most important person in the room. Someone I first met in kindergarten, and yeah, she's kept me ever since. We've been married for over 30 years. Please welcome my wife in the cheap seats over there, Zenny. Thank you for being here today. So Gordon took us back in time. And as we look back in 1958, it's humbling to think about all the things we enjoy today that didn't exist back then, like computers or cell phones. No Twitter, no BBM, not even fax machines. The economic challenges faced then, however, were similar, but the opportunities available to us today are very different. And the work you do is different too. And I think you all appreciate it. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here as well. And it is really a busy time of year. We just finished hosting a very exciting and successful NBA All-Star Weekend. And as I look around the city of Toronto, we are still hosting the world. At the auto show, the golf and travel show, the outdoor adventure show, and the motorcycle show. This is a vibrant, exciting city, and a vibrant, exciting province. Ontario is where opportunity happens. It's a great place to do business, to learn, to raise a family. Here, we work hard to get ahead, but not at the expense of each other. Instead, we invest in each other. We help each other find opportunity. And together, Ontarians are working hard to make sure that it stays that way. And for our part, as your government, our number one priority is jobs in the economy. That has to be a priority in good economic times and in challenging times as well. First, I'll talk about where we find ourselves in the global context of the economy. Second, I'll talk about where we're already doing and how are we creating jobs and growth in Ontario's economy. And third, what will we do in the future to attract investments and stay competitive. So first, let's talk about where we find ourselves. The global recession battered many places around the world. Some opposition critics like to pretend Ontario exists in a bubble and that the hard challenges of the global recession only happened here. As finance minister, I don't have the luxury of living in that kind of fiscal fantasy world. I deal in the cold, hard currency of reality. And here's what I see. We made bold choices, hard choices, the right choices. Other governments in the world took a path to austerity, either by choice or because, frankly, they were forced to. And yet some on the right said Ontario needed to follow suit. But those economies are still struggling today. They chose short-term pain for long-term pain. Other governments, on the other hand, chose to spend and borrow. And some on the left said Ontario needed to spend more and not worry about deficits. But that too would have been reckless and irresponsible, because we cannot simply pass the burden of debt onto future generations. We have to keep an eye on debt. And that's why Ontario chooses a balanced approach. We made smart, targeted investments in areas that would give us a competitive advantage down the road by charting a path to balance and chipping away at the deficit. We didn't sacrifice our universal health care programs or social programs or public-funded education. Year in and year out, we have followed the same prudent, patient plan to beat our targets. Now, I know that some are critical of Ontario's level of debt and worried about the rise in the net debt to GDP ratio. It's important to note that Ontario's debt to GDP ratio still remains below 40%, and we are aiming to bring it below 30% over time. But the solution isn't to slash blindly at the very investments that stimulate growth. That's like slashing your tires and wondering why we're not moving ahead. Yes, we must control spending and our expenses, which we have done. Ontario is the lowest per capita cost provider of public services anywhere in Canada. But you also have to look to foster growth in the economy. So we are managing debt and attracting investors. Our bonds are extremely liquid and highly sought after. They're in demand, and that's because investors have confidence in our plan, confidence in our balanced approach, and confidence in Ontario. We're taking advantage of low interest rates. We've issued over $53 billion of bonds since 2010 at 30-year maturities, which means we're locking in low interest rates to help manage the cost of debt, to minimize rate volatility. Key indicators of our capacity to afford debt are the debt to GDP ratio, as well as interest on debt as a percentage of revenue. So let's compare. Ontario's IOD to revenue was 12% under the Ray government. It grew higher to more than 14% during the Harris and Eves administration. Then it fell to 9.3% under Premier McGuinty. And over the last 4 years, Ontario's interest on debt as a percentage of revenue fell again, even further to below 9%. Now, part of that is because of lower interest rates. But as I've said, we've locked in our long-term rates to protect us against increases. Furthermore, we've been careful to manage debt by borrowing $25 billion less than forecasted. Positive measures were taken, and we beat our targets. And today, Ontario's economy is growing. And investment by businesses are growing too. Productivity is key. Keep in mind that businesses did improve productivity during the downturn. And while uncertain economic winds are currently blowing in the right direction for Ontario, a low dollar, low oil prices, a steady U.S. demand favoring Ontario exports, yeah, we're poised. We're poised, so we need to seize the opportunity and seize the moment and increase our productivity even further, as well as take advantage to grow our exports beyond the U.S. and expand to other markets. Make no mistake, the U.S. is our key partner, but we're still facing real risks. Lower oil may benefit Ontario temporarily, but they hurt other regions of Canada. Equities are unstable, and there are signs that U.S. growth is slowing down. That's why we need to diversify to other markets. I recently visited China and saw signs of fundamental change as they move towards a more consumer-based economy that offers real opportunity for Ontario. Over the last 10 years, China has been a large importer of natural resources from Canada. It was focused mainly on manufacturing. That was good news for Alberta and Saskatchewan. However, as those emerging markets switch to more retail, we can expect higher demand again. But this time, it will be for value-added products and consumer services. Now that's Ontario's advantage. We are world leaders in engineering services, in ICT, in health sciences, retail, and financial services. We're in great shape to meet these changing economic demands. So that's the global context in which we find ourselves. Which brings me to my second point, and that is the things we're doing to be more prosperous. As stated, Ontario's economy is growing. That's a fact. Since the recession in 2009, our GDP has grown over 20% to be a $722 billion economy, and it's still expanding. More importantly, our businesses have created more than 600,000 net new jobs over that time. And in the last 8 weeks alone, Ontario has created 50,000 new jobs. That's 50,000 mostly full-time, high-paying jobs in the private sector, enough to fill the Rogers Centre. And thanks to this growth, our unemployment rate has improved below the national average. So what's behind the growth in jobs? Well, smart businesses and entrepreneurs for one, but also a business climate and an investment climate that's one of the most competitive in North America. We've cut the effective marginal tax rate on new business investments in half since 2009. And we have a lower combined corporate income tax rate than any of the U.S. states. We continue to reduce the cost of doing business by eliminating regulatory requirements and duplication. And more importantly, we have the most highly skilled workforce in the world. We're tackling tomorrow's risks and challenges with the same steady, long-term approach that got us out of the recession and into the competitive place we are today. Because we believe then as we believe now. When you invest in strategic infrastructure, when you invest in building for tomorrow, when you invest in people, in talent and skills, you're building a competitive economy. And that supports jobs and growth. And that's what we've always done in Ontario. You heard reference by Minister Fleming. Ontario has always made those kinds of forward-looking investments. It's just that what we choose to invest in has changed. And as our economy has changed, a century ago, Ontario was a very different place. Cities were smaller. A lot of us lived and worked on farms. Small towns had mills and light manufacturing. The focus of the economy was more local and agricultural. And we took advantage of our plentiful natural resources. Then, not long after, we burned coal. It was cheap, and smokestacks were everywhere. In the mid-20th century, our economy became more industrial. More roads were built to get us moving around, and the suburbs started to sprawl. When I was a kid in the 70s, a lot of people chose to get a job right out of high school. Those were pretty good times. Cars were bigger, hair was longer, my waist size was smaller. I missed that. But that's nostalgia. And pretending otherwise, especially if you're in business or government, would be foolish. And yet, some folks think it's preferable and even possible for our economy to move backwards. And they think all we need to do is cut taxes even further. Snap your fingers, and all the mills will reopen. Smokestacks will spark up. Bell bottoms will return. Hell, even and classic rock will make a comeback. Listen, I like Led Zeppelin too. But while being retro is a fine fashion statement, it doesn't work as a financial statement, because yesterday is behind us. We're not just doing business with our neighbors down the street or even across the border. People are global. Business is global. Jobs are global. And in this global context, local is very important. Our local agri-food processing, mining, forestry, and traditional manufacturing are critical to our economy. The huge potential of Ontario's Ring of Fire in the far north, together with building a new smelter, for example, would give our province a substantial lift. These are primary and essential industries. But today, we also have a knowledge economy and advanced manufacturing. Yesterday, no one was worried about climate change. Today, it's here, and we have to find a way to deal with it. Yesterday was all about cars. Today, people need and demand more transit options. Yesterday, a high school education was enough to land a job. Today, people need post-secondary to be competitive. So yes, decades ago, we enjoyed some pretty good times. But these are really exciting times too. Challenges like climate change are bigger, but since when have Ontarians shied away from a challenge? And the opportunities, they're incredible. We are leaders in quantum research in Waterloo. We have opportunity to lead the world in clean tech, in fintech, and in the next generation of all tech. That drives the economy. We have opportunity. The opportunity to be on the front lines in a low-carbon economy, to be home to the best schools, colleges, and universities, to be the incubator for great ideas that will move our world forward. So that's why we're seizing those opportunities right now. New technologies can be disruptive, but they can also be beneficial. Look at your smartphones. Oh, I mean, not right now. Smartphones created a whole new industry of apps and service providers overnight, and are destroying landlines, cameras, and paper maps. The lesson is clear. Those who are first to innovate win, and win big. Those who are last to adapt lose ground. And in an environment like that, in a globally competitive, quickly changing, knowledge-based economy, we need smart, well-educated, creative workers who can develop and take advantage of those new opportunities. And underneath all that, you need to invest. Invest in effective hardware too, new public transit, and modern infrastructure. You need to invest in those infrastructure measures so businesses can deliver goods to market quickly and competitively. We started these investments when times were tough, during the recession. We didn't listen to those who would simply have us kick the can down the road. We didn't sit around and wait for things to somehow get better. We created a plan. We rolled up our sleeves and got to work. We made investments. And like other governments, including the federal government, we all went into deficit. But in 2010, we set a path to balance. And let's be clear, we will balance the budget next year. Let me say that again. By next year, we will announce a balanced budget. We will announce a balanced budget as planned, on schedule, and through strong fiscal management. Balancing the budget is part of the foundation of our economic plan. It's why we focus on a dynamic business environment, on strategic infrastructure, on investments in skills and training, and all within a fair society. Chipping away at the deficit matters. To continue looking forward, not backwards, matters. To strengthen our province's place in the knowledge economy matters. There are opportunities to be seized upon, but we need to act quickly. So, we will deliver this year's budget very soon. In fact, tomorrow in the legislature, I'll be formally announcing that our government will table the 2016 budget on Thursday, February 25th. I'm proud that this budget will reflect priorities of Ontarians with whom we've consulted extensively. These consultations have informed us in how to meet the changing world around us. Just as new technologies change our economy, they pave new ways for people to connect with government. And in this digital age, especially through budget talks, we connect to conversations anywhere, anytime, to keep up to date and to be nimble. And people share their insights, and that's helping us write the budget to help position Ontario for greater prosperity. And my final point is, how will Ontario be competitive in the future? In our budget, we'll propose the Business Growth Initiative. It was initially introduced in the recent fall statement. It's a new and collaborative partnership between colleges and universities and businesses that will help us discover new innovations, to bring them to market, and create jobs. We'll identify investments from clean tech to the auto sector. We'll promote hubs to ensure Ontario schools and industries can work together to advance, produce, and deliver to the world. We'll also be strengthening Ontario's leadership in financial services. And speaking of this sector's leadership, congratulations go to Maureen Jensen, who recently was appointed as chair of the Ontario Securities Commission. She's well respected for her extensive work and as the first woman to hold the position. Maureen. I wouldn't applaud too much. I mean, I kind of feel sorry for her. We'll be relying on Maureen for her leadership to assist us in the transition to a common national securities regulator, which is yet another project long overdue. And that'll make our capital market system more competitive. Thank you, Maureen. And to further strengthen our leadership in the financial sector, I'm pleased to announce that we'll be partnering with a $900,000 per year commitment with the Toronto Financial Services Alliance. This, we can clap. This will help promote a key sector that drives growth and innovation and certainly offers many opportunities. So before I close, I'd also like to provide you with an update regarding the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. Retirement security is a key part of our plan for economic prosperity as well as social fairness. 3/4 of Ontario workers between the ages of 25 and 34 don't have a workplace pension. Thanks to Mitzi Hunter, the ORPP will be there to close the retirement savings gap for the people. And as you know, of course, pensions are pools of capital. Not only does the ORPP provide for workers in retirement, it leverages something that Ontario excels at. Ontario is respected and renowned for running strong pension and pension funds. Funds all over the world use their capital to invest in lots of projects. For example, in 2010, the California Public Employees Retirement System invested over $200 million in an ownership stake of Gatwick Airport. Last year, CPP, OMERS, and Ontario Teachers invested almost $3 billion in the Chicago Skyway Toll Road. And the ORPP will make decisions on investments through an independent board, arm's length from government. We all benefit from higher disposable income at retirement, as well as by increased level of investments. So, I'm pleased to announce today that we have reached an agreement with our federal partner to work together to achieve our mutual goal of improving pensions for all Canadians. we have agreed to enter into a national dialogue to enhance the Canada Pension Plan. To foster and accommodate this dialogue, we are extending the time required to comply with the ORPP. We've heard from businesses, such that Ontario will start enrollment of the employers in January of 2017 and only start the first phase of contribution in January of 2018, 1 year later than originally planned. So we're giving employers more time to prepare, and about 400 companies involved will have extra time they've asked for. Ottawa has agreed to facilitate the ORPP plan registration and data sharing arrangements. So we will explore options with Ottawa to ensure that key elements of the ORPP administration are completed efficiently and cost-effectively. It's also an agreement that will allow us to look at ways to meet the goals of the ORPP within an enhanced CPP framework. And should provincial agreements on CPP enhancement not be realized, then this will still preserve our ability to implement the ORPP. In either case, more Ontarians will experience a more secure retirement, because we know that in the end, you reap what you save. And I'll have much more to say on these and many other things next week. Ontario's 2016 budget is looking to the future. We don't spend a lot of time looking backwards. Instead, we ask, what's next? And what's next is a province determined to lead the world, led by productive businesses and talented people, with a government determined to work together with Ontarians and as Ontarians. And when I look around Ontario today, I see what everyone who comes here sees so clearly. What my old man saw when he first arrived in 1953. When I look at Ontario, I see room for everyone. Room for everyone to compete and do business. Room to learn. And above all, room to help each other. Working together to achieve jobs for today and jobs for tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for your time. So Gordon has asked if I could take a few questions. So I didn't do question period today, so maybe a couple is not a bad idea, Gordon. Oh, this is good. That's a good question. There's quite a bit of reviews, as you know, from Fisco, DICO, investment advisors. We've just announced some changes to the credit unions, and all of that will be outlined shortly. It's an exciting time to enable us to be more competitive, also to be more responsive to consumers, and to enable the industry to strive. It is a critical industry in Ontario. We've taken quite a leadership role. It's a huge contributor to our GDP, and I'm very excited about some of the recommendations I've seen thus far, so there's more to come in short order. Thank you. Well, that was...
Mr. Sousa, this is the first time that I had an opportunity to hear you speak. As a small businessman who has a store in Kensington Market, I'm extremely proud of you. And when you mentioned your dad, it really touched a soft spot. You came from extreme beginnings, and you made it to be the minister of this wonderful province that I love and I adore. And it shows you that in this country, you can do, and there's room for everybody to reach sky's the limit. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this. And I do believe in you, Minister. You spoke from your heart. You're a great speaker. It's unbelievable to see you at the Empire Club. I knew you from Kensington Market, you and your beautiful wife. And it gives me a great pleasure to know you for all those wonderful years when we were kids. Thank you very much, Minister.
So here's a shameless plug. You talk about the ingenuity and the hard work that the people of Ontario make day in and day out. That's Tom from Tom's Place. You bet you got the best suits anywhere, right from Tom, anywhere you need to be. We have known a lot of merchants in Kensington Market over the years when I was growing up. My wife's father had his store right next to Tom's. So he's also there to make sure that I don't go out of line. He's a great guy, as are so many in the market who has actually informed me in enabling us to have that work ethic and to ensure that we look out for one another. So, Tom, thank you very much for being here, as all of you. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, usually our guest speakers are only thanked once, but thank you, Tom, for doing the first thank you. Here to thank our minister again is Noble Shamar.
Thank you, Mr. President, Minister Hunter, Minister Sousa. Thank you for your remarks. Now your fourth time here at the club. It's clear that your priorities in this budget and in your term as minister has been jobs and the economy. We appreciate you addressing the club. You heard it here first. The budget will be next Thursday, so thank you for choosing this podium to make that announcement. And you also heard it here first that there's a new dialogue nationally to be talking about the national pension scheme, and thank you again for your remarks. On behalf of the directors of the Empire Club and all of our guests here, we really appreciate your time and for your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noble. And thank you to our generous sponsors today, TD Bank for being our event sponsor, Edelman for being our VIP reception sponsor. I'd also like to thank the National Post, which is our national print sponsor, and Rogers Television, our broadcaster. We'd also like to thank mediaevents.ca, Canada's online event space, for live webcasting today's event. And as you may know, this event will be watched by tens of thousands of people around the world. Please follow us on Twitter at empire_club and visit us online at empireclub.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And please join us again in the near future. We have lots of great events coming up. For example, Neil Bruce, the President and CEO of SNC-Lavalin, on March 23rd. Callan Rovanescu, the President and CEO of Air Canada, will be here on April the 4th, and Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin joins us on June the 3rd. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attendance today. This meeting is now adjourned.